Good afternoon. Good afternoon, and welcome everybody to Paul's Monday Market Update number 231 for Monday, 13th of July 2026. I hope you're all well. Hope you can hear me. Hope you can see the slides as well. If you are in the room, it'd be good to know that the technology is working for us rather than against us. Fabulous to have people here. Hope you've had a good weekend. Hope you've enjoyed some of those sporting results over the weekend. Hope you're ready for what is going to be a pretty busy week ahead in markets. Okay, it's basically it's a week where kind of markets going to enter a bit of a crucial week as earning seasons begin and the inflation returns to center stage and a whole host of other things. Okay. For those of you joining us for the first time, the Monday Market Update is just that. It is me flying through as much as I can share with you in the next 30 minutes, looking at strength and weakness within FX indices and commodities markets, looking at a few charts of interest at your watch lists, and then a look at the live markets. It is not a signal service. It's not trade recommendations. It's me sharing with you what I'm looking at, which may be of relevance or interest to yourselves. And as always, if you want a little bit more help and support, okay, to sustain performance during the next quarter, the VTP Trader Accountability Group is running, helping you build kind of discipline, accountability, and consistency in your own trading. As always, if you've got questions, you can ping me, okay? You can look at the bit.ly code or use that QR code to find out a bit more information. Okay, here we go. So this is one of my profiles here, indices and commodities. So I've got Dow on the weekly, NASDAQ on the weekly, S&P 500 on the weekly, Russell on the weekly, FTSE on the weekly, Nikkei, DAX, and oil. Okay, so interestingly, based upon what's been going on, oil has been in a fantastic downtrend, but we're kind of popping there a little bit. And that is just, if you're looking at in the daily chart, see how that's kind of, we're $68, we kind of, bottomed out at. And now we're here around this kind of, this is the 20, it's the 200, this price, it's above $70. As I said, is this going to be support or are the Americans, the Iranians going to have a cuddle and basically prices will drop again? Okay, so once again, all right, geopolitical tensions will drive this, and we'll see how that plays out over this week, and that has knock-on impacts, as I said, to places like United Airlines and Canadian dollar, etc. Okay, so we're at that kind of space there. When we look at the indexes, so last week I talked about how I was kind of curious to see what was going on with the indexes. It was I thought a little bit of a breakdown, as in kind of Dow and Russell continue to work higher, but the sort of S&P 500 was kind of going a bit sideways, and NASDAQ was kind of, I thought, was coiling up a little bit. And I'd say, certainly when you look at S&P 500, certainly when we look at S&P 500, we kind of, I would say actually we kind of worked our way a little bit higher. And if you look at that, based on that, okay, that's actually the highest weekly close, all right, for the S&P 500, all right. That's, that would be bullish, all right, and it's the highest weekly close. Okay, so as I said, it is a major week ahead. Does that major week basically support this, which means then you've got to be looking at, well, we've got to be pushing again to all-time highs. That's what I'll be looking at there. When it comes to NASDAQ, all right, I talked NASDAQ about how I thought it was coiling up a bit on the weekly chart, but even more so on the daily chart. What we can see here in the daily chart, I talked last week about how I thought this 50-period moving average was acting as real dynamic support, and as we coiled up, we kind of came through it last week and then basically reversed it. That's a morning star, which would be kind of normally positive, but we couldn't really get above that 20-period moving average with any real conviction, and then kind of working our way down here now. So we're pivoting around that 50, around this kind of supporting level here, right? So once again, as I said, it is a major week ahead. So I'm looking at, is that number going to pump those tech firms higher, or are we going to sort of roll over and fall away? That's what I'm kind of curious and looking at there when it comes to the NASDAQ. FTSE. Yeah, it broke out of that coil, but it hasn't exactly, I wouldn't exactly say that's kind of filled me with any particular joy in terms of how it's worked. All right. And I still think, yeah, it's getting supported by kind of the sort of mincing around in the energy sector. But when I look at the daily chart, it came through it, but it came back down to it. 20 is above the 50, above the 200. Price is above the 50. It's nudging its way back up. I just wonder, whether you've got domestic political shenanigans going on this week in the UK. As I said, personally, everyone in the UK is waiting to see who does Burnham announce as his chancellor. I think that is going to have a huge impact, and I think it will also have an impact on the FTSE as well. So until that time, we're crawling about a bit. So that's the way I look at that. DAX now, I'd said, I've been saying for a while that every time it got above 25,000, it struggled to hold it. And I thought, well, maybe last week they've broken it. We had seen when we last time Monday, the week before, we'd had a really strong push to eyes. But as you can see, bang, we're back down at 25,000. We're holding above it. Okay, we did hold above it, last week. And if I go down to the daily chart, you'd look at that, say, we are above 25,000. We are holding above the 50, which has acted as kind of support there. Is this just basically now building a base above 25,000? That's what perhaps I'll be looking at there, okay, and want to see, do we get lots of supporting wicks? That means that we push a little bit higher, but even its DAX, everything is going to be indicated or kind of take its lead from US market sentiment off the back of earnings and geopolitical tensions and inflation numbers. That's the way I see that kind of working out for us. Quickly look at gold. Last week I talked about how I thought, maybe were we building a base here at 4,000? All right, was this a chance, and were we going to pop our way back up to the sort of 50 for 430, 380 area? As you can see, that basically the kind of war on sentiment has basically drifted ourselves lower there. Okay, that's what's happening there with gold. I thought, as I said on the daily chart, bit of a double bottom, push our way above the 20, but as you can see, we're back, and I expect us to come down to 4,000 as well. Okay, that's where I'd drift us down. That's kind of the war on is not necessarily good for gold at the moment. Okay, and so as long as that kind of tension remains, we'd be short-term bearish with that in terms of gold. Silver, not massively dissimilar in that sense of the weekly. I thought we'd hold around about 60, but you can see for yourself, we kind of continue to drift that little bit lower, haven't we, the last week? Okay, holding beneath 60 there on the at the moment on silver. Bitcoin. Yeah, Bitcoin, I was kind of talking about, where we once again, we're building a kind of a base, double bottom there, triple bottom at 60,000, trying to eke ourselves above the weekly 200 period moving average. All right, I wouldn't exactly say it's doing it with any real gusto, but I would look at that interestingly. The 20 period moving average is going sideways. It's acting as dynamic support. The 50 is coming down. Are we just getting a little bit of a squeeze there? Is this all going to take its lead from the US dollar? That's what I look at there. Okay, and of course that US dollar is going to have its lead taken from geopolitical tension, a little bit of the earnings, but also the inflation numbers. Okay, and we also have Mr. Wash testifying this week as well. Okay, so people will be interested to hear what he has to say.